This is 11 Honors Lit, and we're going to review chapters 6 through 11 in Huckleberry Finn. We'll start with the questions that you should have. We're going to go through the whole page kind of quickly, but this is what we did in class. We'll start with chapter 5 through 7, number 1. It says, why has Huck's father returned to town? He's returned to get money from his son, the money that Huck and Tom had won or had been awarded from the book Tom Sawyer. Number 2, what change in Huck upsets Huck, the father, Pap, the most? And that's his education. Number 3, what about the rest of the family? They've all died. So it gives Huck a kind of a tragic background. And for the rest of the book, you'll notice that Huck, when he has to lie to get out of a situation, he'll invent an entire family with father and mother and brothers and sisters, which is kind of sad because he doesn't have any of those. Number 4, how does the judge try to reform Pap? By being nice to him, by treating him with dignity, and he completely fails because Pap ends up taking advantage of his kindness, gets drunk one night, falls off the roof, and breaks his leg. Huck is finally kidnapped by his father, who is angry at him for his education and still trying to get the money from Judge Thacker. And he locks him in a cabin on the banks of the Mississippi. And Huck finally escapes by sawing through the wall. And then he creates a scenario which makes it look like he was killed. So he's trying to cover his tracks. Number 6, sentiments are true feelings. Like you would you would cry at a funeral. Sentimentalism is always false, and it's when you cry at a movie about a funeral. And so in this book, Huck, or that is Mark Twain, makes fun of sentimentality or sentimentalism whenever he can. And the judge is a good example. He was more emotionally involved because the problem with sentimentalism, it supplants reason, common sense. And so he found out from this experience with Pap that some people, you just have to be reasonable about it, and you have to have some common sense. Some people aren't going to change when you're nice to them. They can only change, if at all, through firmness. Number 7, while Huck is setting the stage for his own pretended murder, he wishes Tom could be there to throw in the fancy touches. How does Huck's make-believe differ from that of Tom? Tom made up gangs and he got people with him, but it was all for fun. It was literally fun and games. Huck's pretend is life or death. He's trying to cover his tracks so that nobody will come after him after he escapes. And then the 2 comments in number 8 about the Mississippi. Down by the village was the river a whole mile wide and awfully still and grand. And the sky looks ever so deep when you lay on your back in the moonshine. I never knowed it before, and how a boy can hear on the water such nights. It's not sentimentalism, it's not romanticism, it's just an honest enjoyment of nature and kind of in awe of it, of its beauty. So Huck has a sensitive side to him, but not a sentimental side. Oh, now we move to chapter 8 and 11. Why did Jim run away? He ran away because he was going to be sold down the river. And he also runs away knowing that so he can come back and rescue his family from slavery. Number 2, why didn't Jim simply cross the river and escape to the free state of Illinois from the slave state of Missouri? Probably because of the fugitive slave law that would have allowed slave hunters to follow him, even though he's in a free state, and bring him back. So he's got to come up with something smarter, which shows you Jim's intelligence. That would have been what maybe a lot of people would have done, but he's too smart for that. Number 3 talks about the floating house that Jim keeps Huck from seeing. Huck or Jim goes in the house and he sees a dead body and refuses to let Huck see the dead body. We find out literally on the last page of the book who that person was, but it shows that Jim is acting like a father to Huck and protecting him from bad things. Number 4, through talking to Mrs. Loftus, what does Huck learn about Pap and about Jim? Well, later he and Jim meet on Jackson's Island, and they spend days, if not weeks, there. And needing to know some information, Huck dresses up like a girl to visit Miss Loftus, and he finds out that Pap has disappeared and that Jim is accused or suspected of murdering Huck, which is not at all what Huck wanted to happen. Number 4, through talking to Miss Loftus, I did that. Number 5, why does Ms. Loftus want her husband to catch Jim to get the reward money? Number 6, earlier in the story, in hunting for Huck's corpse, what superstitious practice involving bread do the townspeople and the ferry boat follow? They put a loaf of bread into the top of it. They put some mercury. And the idea was that the bread would float to the person, which seems, I can't think of any scientific explanation for that, or that it could possibly work, but ironically it actually does work, because one loaf floats up and finds Huck. He's not dead, but it finds him. Number 7, mention 2 of Jim's predictions. One is about the rainstorm while they're on Jackson's Island. He predicts, by watching or observing nature, this really isn't a superstition. It's more practical science and observation. He's able to see, as animals do react to weather, he's able to see that in advance. The other thing is some of the bad things that happen later in the book happen because Huck had touched snakeskin. The story of that is, number 8, is that he took a dead snake, which he killed, and wrapped it up and put it in the sleeping bag of Jim. And when Jim gets in that night, the mate had found the dead snake and bit Jim and makes him terribly ill for a while. Huck feels bad about it, but he never apologizes or even confesses. And this is an important thing. We see Huck at the beginning with Tom playing a joke on Jim. So he really doesn't treat him with a lot of respect or as a real human being. After all, they would see him as a slave. Here he does the same thing, but he feels bad about it. So it shows the beginning of his concern for Jim, and that he's come to appreciate him. Number 9, going back to Ms. Loftus, she finally figures out that Huck is not a boy because of several things. She notices that he doesn't throw like a girl, he doesn't thread a needle like a girl, and when he catches, she throws something into his lap instead of making a lap from a skirt that he had on to catch it, he traps it between his knees, and these give him away. However, now that he's been discovered, Huck does not confess at all. He's so nimble, mentally, intellectually nimble and bold, that he just comes up with another lie. She tests him to see if he's from the country, and he knows all the tricks that she tries to test him about cows and moss. He knows all that, so she finally believes him again. And the question to number 11 was, the answer to number 11 was that it just shows his ability to take care of himself in a difficult situation. It's not the first, and it won't be the last time this happens. Finally, one of the most significant lines in the book is when Huck leaves Ms. Loftus and makes his way back to Jackson Island. He does so because he knows that Ms. Loftus' husband and other men are going to go over there to look for Jim. And so when he finds him, first of all, he learned that everybody thinks he's dead. And so when he goes up to Jim to warn him, he says, they're after us. The word us is significant because they weren't after both of them. They're only after one of them. That's Jim. But I think that comment shows that Huck sees them as a team. And he identifies with Jim now. And we can see that gradual growth. Again, here, after the last time we made fun of Jim, and regretted it, now he really identifies with Jim. So that's the end of the questions. I have made the assignment for the class to read chapters 12 through 18. It's about 65 pages by January 6th, which is a Thursday. So you will come back on Tuesday, and you'll have several nights. You might need to read some over the holidays. You don't have to, but I'll probably end up eventually quizzing on that one. So we'll bring this to an end. Thank you for listening.